This week, guys, I want to talk all about compliance and conformance. Now, when I start talking about this, I am not in any way trying to undermine the need for tech data, compliance and conformance. But let's talk about compliance and conformance. I don't know if I've ever told you, but I'm a little bit of a mad, keen photographer. Yes, I know, and before you all get into that collective sigh, Mike's talking about photography again. I've said previously multiple times that the comparison between what you do in the photography or the art sector and what we do in technical information is actually quite comparable. There's lots of principles, philosophies and ideas which are the same. But this week I'm going to talk about compliance and conformance. Now, we hear about this all the time when we're talking about technical information, but my concern is that sometimes we focus so hard on trying to get it absolutely perfect and we're missing a trick with what the end user actually wants or needs. Now, we've got a webinar coming up on this kind of topic with Flatiron Juve in a couple of weeks, and I'll put a link below and you can go and have a register for that and have a look at what we're going to talk about, because we're going to talk about, are we focused so much on the back end that we're losing focus on the front end and what it is our end user actually wants. Now, let's talk about compliance and conformance. Now, when I first got into photography, I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to learn all of the technicalities around photography. So whether that's the exposure triangle, the rule of thirds and the spiral effect. And if you're a photographer, you know all of those things that I'm talking about. And I wanted to learn those to the nth degree. And I noticed that there was lots of guys out there that just hammered home about getting the technicalities of a photo right. So knowing, for me, understanding how this thing worked and how all the buttons worked and how everything came together, and depending on which lever you pulled depended on the results that you got. Now, this photo that I'm about to put up above me was my very first technically perfect picture. Now, what's important about this? Well, I spent hours hidden in a woodland waiting for this image. I had the camera set up perfect, the exposure triangle I had set correct, my white balance was perfect, and the bird came along and I took a picture, and it is one of the technically best pictures I've ever taken. I know that because I posted it online on a forum, and I had about 10-15 pro photographers or expert photographers come to me and say, great picture, very crisp, very perfect, technically very, very accurate. Now, the problem with that is that it was actually not very inspiring picture, but it hit all of the technical notes. But I spent a great deal of time, energy and effort learning how I had set up the camera, getting the light conditions perfect, sitting and waiting for the subject, the bird, to come out of the hedgerow so I could take a picture. So this was technically conformant. It conformed to all of the rules of photography, and the plaudits that I got were from all of those that understand the technicalities of those particular imageries, or how you set up the cameras and how you get a very crisp image. Now, that was important to me because I felt like I'd actually achieved something. Now, conversely, I took a photo basically a week later. I'm lucky enough to live where there's a lot of wildlife at the back of my garden, and we have a young fox family that lives down the back end of my garden, and it was very dusky, very sort of dark, and the conditions weren't great, but the foxes were out playing, and there was a great opportunity for a picture. And what I did is I just went and grabbed my camera and just took a picture straight away. Didn't care about how the camera was set up, how it was configured. I didn't care about the exposure triangle. I didn't care about anything, because I knew that if I didn't get the image done at that point, the opportunity was going to be missed. And I took an image which was technically poor. It did not hit all of the exposure triangle. It didn't hit any of the rules of photography. Yet when I posted that image online, and I'll put it up very shortly, I got hundreds of comments, requests for printed copies of it. I asked if I wanted to enter it into magazines. I asked if I wanted to put it into competitions, and some people were saying they wait years and years for an image like this to come along. And this failed technically every single test. Now, when I posted it online, those same guys that said great technical picture for my other bird, they came on and said, well, you're not technically compliant to this, you're clearly underexposed, you know, the subject is far too dark, and, you know, they technically pulled the image apart. Yet those people that didn't care about the technicalities of an image, they loved it. They wanted prints of it. They wanted to enter it into competitions. They asked me to put it in magazines. And this image, as I said, technically was poor. And here it is. This is a picture that I took out the back of my house. I picked up, run and gun they call it in photography. I just grabbed the picture with whatever the camera was set to, and it was actually set to daytime photography as I'd been out through the day, but as I said, it was dusky. So I think what I want to make the point here is that we are so often focused on what's happening in the creation and the compliance end that we forget what it is our end user, our consumer, actually wants to see and wants to be engaged with. And that's why we're doing this webinar with Flatiron Juve. They're talking about how you can change the emphasis slightly from the back end of the production to the delivery, and you will see better results. You will see much higher ROI and return. So whilst I say compliance and conformance is very important, and it is something that we have to, especially in aerospace information, but sometimes we have to do something like a UOR, an urgent operational requirement. We just have to get it done. We have to get it out. We have to run and gun and publish it and get it out to our end user. And they're probably just as happy, if not happier, with what we give them. Anyway, so that was my thought for this week. Compliance and conformance. Are we focused so much on compliance and conformance and we're not really worrying too much about the end user? In any case, I would like to know what your opinions are on compliance and conformance. Are we over-emphasizing this? Of course, we have to have all of these rules and business rules checks and all of these things for integration, but are we over-focused on it? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Anyway, Michael Ingledew from TDW. We're at the Royal Oak here in Chichester. If you've seen any of our previous tutorials, you know where we are. Had loads of comments on that. We're actually going to go and enjoy probably one of the last days of the summer to go and enjoy a nice pub lunch. And yeah, I love my photography.